allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Second order of business is approval of the agenda. Councilmember Hearn, did you want to add something to the regular agenda?
Nope.
Or Hearn, Holtz?
Okay.
Sorry.
Did I?
Holtz, Hearn.
Yes, can we add as number 16, a performance review summary for Administrator Miller?
I think that would be good. Thanks for remembering that. Anything else? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve the amended agenda.
Motion to approve the amended agenda?
Second.
Motion is second for approval of the amended agenda. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Agenda is hereby approved. Approval of minutes from June 3rd, 2025. Is there anything that's outstanding? If we're good with it, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from June 3rd.
Motion to approve minutes from June 3rd, 2025.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. We get to the public comments and inquiries. We do have one gentleman that would like to speak today. Please, when I say your name, come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. You'll have 6 minutes if needed. And would Paul Fitzpatrick please come forward?
Mayor Cadenhead, City Council members, on June 2nd of this year, I sent out an email request to my neighbors at the Fields at Arbor Glen, the independent living townhomes and apartments right behind you on 39th Street, requesting that I speak to the City Council on their behalf. And a significant majority of my neighbors said yes, they would approve what I had to say to the City Council, which I wrote out for them. And so they all agreed that I should say the following to you. On behalf of your neighbors at the Fields at Arbor Glen, I thank the leaders of our town of Lake Elmo for the construction of the crosswalk and the signage with it. We know that this will not make all autos on 39th Street stop when we cross, but it is a start. Thanks to our leaders hearing the needs of citizens and responding to our request. What's next, you may ask? You never know what motivated senior citizens can do. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't believe we have any presentations this evening. Our consent agenda reads as the following. Number 2, approve payments and disbursements. Number 3, approve state performance measures, resolution 2025-047. Number 4, approve Crossroads East First Edition landscape security reduction. Number 5, approve hiring of public works operator. Number 6, approve special event permit for 4th of July parade. Number 7, approve CDA grant for ULI TAP resolution 2025-044. Number 8, approve pay request. Number 4 for well number 2 PFAS water treatment plant. Number 9, approve change order number 1 for well number 2 PFAS water treatment plant. Number 10, approve pay request number 3 for well number 2 PFAS removal equipment. Number 11, approve change order number 2 for the Hudson Boulevard improvements, segment A. Number 12, approve pay request number 4 for the Hudson Boulevard Improvement Segment A. I'll entertain a motion on approval of the consent agenda as read.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda is hereby approved. Getting into our regular agenda, number 13 is set sale resolution, 2025 bond issuance, resolution 2025-045. Is this yours? All right.
Get my mic on. I will very quickly introduce Tammy Umdahl of Northland Security, but just some quick background on our bond issuance tonight. This is solely for the 2025 street improvement project. The total bond issuance will be $2,185,000, which is about $1 million less than what we originally planned for this project, because the project was significantly cheaper than we had expected. So the bond sale is set, tentatively set for July 15th. In addition to the bond resolution, there's also a motion to approve the service agreement with Northland for $31,388.50. Tammy, take it away.
Mayor, Council, good evening. Tammy Umdahl with Northland Public Finance, serving as advisor to the city on the sale of the bonds. Tonight is the start of the process. This resolution calls for the sale of the bonds. The actual sale of the bonds would happen on July 15th. Clarissa, Finance Director, reviewed the purpose of it and noted that this amount is smaller than what was originally anticipated. The pledge on the bonds will be property tax levy and special assessment. There are no utility or enterprise revenue bonds as part of this. It's solely related to streets, so that's also a change from more recent history for Lake Elmo. With respect to interest rates, for purposes of planning and tonight, the estimated true interest cost, which is the basis that we would use to evaluate the bids that are received on July, is estimated at 4.18% for planning purposes. The actual rate will depend on market conditions on the date of the sale. We are recommending, as in the past, that the city seek a rating on these bonds, and the current rating outstanding from Moody's is AA1. So that will be part of the process, and when I'm here on July 15th, I can speak to the results of that rating review process. With that, Mayor and Council, there is a resolution before you calling for the sale of the bonds and the approximate amount of $2,185,000. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have for me.
Questions for Ms. Umdahl? All right, no questions at this time, thank you. We do have a recommendation, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve Resolution 2025-045, resolution providing for competitive negotiated sale of $2,185,000 general obligation improvement bonds, Series 2025A.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, discussion. Councilmember Dragisich.
I'm not opposed to the sale of the bonds. I'm not supporting the $2,185,000. We levied special levies for this year, $600,000 for street maintenance levy and $93,000 for our improvement reserve fund levy. We did that because we're trying to get our debt level down. We have $60 million in outstanding debt. Based on our CIP and our discussion then, our debt would rise to about $65 million and come back down to $60 million 10 years from now. The impact of that debt is significant on our residents and businesses. We levy about a little over $5 million to pay our operating costs, public works, public safety, fire, all the normal city operations with the exception of our utilities. We levy a little over $3 million just to make the debt service payments on our outstanding bonds. So if we didn't have that debt, our property taxes would be 1/3 lower than they are right now. So I would like to see us, I know we have to fund our capital improvement, but I'd like to see us use the money we've levied to reduce the amount of that bond and reduce the fiscal impact of debt service on our residents and try and get that burden down. We need to get that debt level down over some period of time, over the next 10 years, to something much more reasonable, like 30 million. We can't be in the 60 million range forever and ever and ever. And I know we can't solve that problem tonight, but if you remember during our CIP, we talked about getting that debt down. And that was what the purpose of the levies were. And so I support us selling a bond. I just think we need to reduce it by about $700,000 and take the money we levied and use that to reduce the debt. By reducing that debt, we would save about $183,000 in debt service payments over the life of the bond.
Over the life of the bond.
Yep.
I can't recall, what is the bond life?
I mean,
on
we
this?
sell $183,000 in interest, $183,649 based on the estimate, and we'd save about $91,000 a year in debt service, based on the estimate. So about $100,000 a year less in debt service, which we won't have to levy on our residents and businesses. I mean, as we look at our CIP coming in, I think it would be incumbent on us to develop a plan to get that debt level down. We're better off to actually levy more dollars and save the interest costs than to keep selling 2, 4, 5, 6 million every year. You have to have some plan, but like I said, when we put those levies in place, it was specifically to reduce our debt level. And I think we should apply it to that because that's what we told folks during the Truth in Taxation hearing.
Yes.
Sorry, if I could clarify, the street maintenance fund levy is for street maintenance, specifically mill and overlays.
Seal coats.
Thank you, seal coating. The only portion that we levied for major projects is the infrastructure reserve, 409 for $93,333. And the CIP document that was adopted specifically stated that this project would be bonded for. So using that cash is not part of the long-term plan that I have. And I would also address that the strategy that we've been talking about isn't fully adopted nor fully thought out. That's part of that long-term strategic financial plan that we've been kind of working towards. So yes, it is in the plan going forward. We do not have the levies to support that right now.
So the $600,000 that we levied for streets is chip seals and maintenance around, that's for Public Works Department to be used, is it?
Right.
Is it
That's
during
spent.
2025? It's spent?
It's spent.
Okay, all right.
So we spent the $600,000 in 2025 already on street maintenance?
Correct.
Interesting, because in our budget, it says it's for capital.
It's for,
It says for capital expenditures in our budget.
well, we're gonna, so the street maintenance fund is set up as a capital fund in that it's a larger project fund. We moved away from doing the large transfers out of the general fund into more of this CIP type setup. But it is like large maintenance type items.
And what did we spend it on in 2025?
don't know.
$600,000.
I'm gonna let Nate speak to that.
Yep, so it's not completely spent, but it's gone to the Reed Park parking lots, and then the rest of it's going to, as Finance Director stated, mill and overlay project that's coming later this year, and chip seals and crack fill projects.
So why
What
would
was
the
the
Reed
total
Park
of that?
parking lots come from the park fund as opposed to the street fund? Why would we pay them from a street fund?
I'm not entirely positive about that, but how much was the mill and overlay project?
It's still actually being scoped, but we anticipate it's going to be on the order of, $400,000, $300,000.
Wasn't there a larger project that was almost $1 million?
I'm not recalling.
Okay,
Yeah.
we can review that, but my understanding is that within the last couple of years that we've kind of maxed out that street maintenance
Yeah.
expenditures from
So
those
that-
projects.
That money's budgeted for projects this year already. Okay.
And so, I guess when I read it, it said capital outlay. I assume that meant capital outlay.
Yeah, well, I would consider maybe it's just a nuance in the jargon, right? And I can certainly understand the reading it that way. But as long as we know that that money is outlaid for the maintenance for Public Works Department on our system, and, you know, we can talk at a different time if that money for a parking lot, which would be a city parking lot, whether it's Parks and Rec or city function, to me is it's just, you know, it's just moving, it's the same amount of money, it's gonna be gone somewhere, so. And that parking lot is definitely in need of it, so.
And then we have stormwater improvements included in all of these projects, and they're not being paid from the stormwater utility fund. We're gonna bond for them as well.
The
All of the streets have
stormwater fund
improvements.
is also for MS4 and cleanouts and things of that,
It's not to replace catch basins and storm pipes
not generally,
in the stormwater fund?
not that I'm aware of. That gets done, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that's part of capital, like, projects that get designed to get done.
Well, this is a capital project, this is
Right.
an improvement project. It's
Right,
capital.
right, but I don't think that's,
And it's have
I
stormwater
think the
components.
stormwater fund pays for like MS4 and cleanouts and maintaining the system that's in place, not necessarily redoing pipes or the pipes that are part of a project. I don't think when we're doing our city projects like we would in a state project, that the funding is coming from different buckets. I think it's coming from the one bucket, and the drainage system is in there, but it's not part of that doesn't get paid from the stormwater fee.
So we pay for water components and sewer components from those utilities, but we don't pay for stormwater improvements from the stormwater utility. Like we're replacing that culvert,
That's correct.
and we're paying for that from the stormwater utility.
That's as I understand it.
we're replacing a culvert on Hudson Road, and we're paying for that from the stormwater utility. It's in the CIP. When I asked the question, it's about $400,000.
Which one, and the
Yep.
one that we're approving tonight
Yep.
for the,
Yep, that's
Yeah.
coming from the stormwater utility, it's a stormwater pipe, part of a street
I
project.
guess then I'm confused.
And typically, a city uses stormwater utility to pay for stormwater utility improvements.
Yeah. Yes, Clarissa.
To Nick's point, that's correct. So it's not that we don't pay for CIP projects, it's just that we don't normally break those stormwater expenses out of the street projects. That's not to say that we can't. I
Right.
personally feel like it's maybe a little bit of overcomplicating the for no reason, in that everyone in the city uses the stormwater, and it's kind of funded largely equitably across the city, whereas water and sewer are very specific to those people, those users. Only some properties have water, only some properties have sewer.
Right,
Everybody pays for stormwater.
right.
You know, I guess my experience is different, but and we have the $93,000 we levied to put into the infrastructure fund. That's specifically for infrastructure.
Right, and as I understand it, isn't that a pot of money that we set aside, and that should be growing, right?
Yes, and so in theory, the long-term plan shows us, well, the long-term plan that is in the works with our CIP, essentially, the goal is to even out the levy,
Right.
get these pots of money started, and figure out how we can decrease debt using that pot and comparing to this giant list of projects that Nate sends over to me every year.
Right.
So that's sort of what we're doing, and what we're going to talk about at the workshop in July is all of these projects, where's the funding coming from? What do these CIP levies need to look like moving forward?
Sure.
So that we can kind of get us to where we need to go and get to that decrease in debt over time. So, I mean, the decrease in debt already, the impacts, just being able to, decrease the project scope, just having the conversation about, sort of this moving in that direction, You know, we've got the utility studies, so we're choosing to use cash on a number of those things. So overall, as a percentage of projects, we're definitely we're bonding for fewer projects than we have in the past. The 2.1 million versus, what was it, 5 million last year?
5 million,
So
yeah.
we're headed in the right direction.
And what's planned for next year? 8 million? in the
You know,
CIP?
I don't have that
I just
right in
think-
front of me, but yeah.
I just think we spent a lot of time talking about trying to get it down, and here we are, you know, bonding again and not bring any additional levy money into it.
Well, I think we've already, what I'm understanding, Councilmember Dragisich, is that the levied money is accounted for in projects that are being used in the city. So that money, that 693,000 indicated from the levy is accounted for maintenance and chip seals, crack sealing, things of that nature in our city.
I didn't get of the 600,000 that they talked about in Fund 408, which was to avoid transfer from the general fund to cover those projects, they said they had about $400,000, but I guess I just think that we were going down a different path, and it's not the path I thought we agreed to when we did this levy, but, you know, I'm just one voice. And I think,
Right.
I think we'll be, you know, backed up $3 million plus levy for debt service, and the 35% of our taxes is going to pay debt. Not so sure that's doing our residents a favor.
I think as we progress forward and decrease the amount that we bonded versus what has been bonded in the past, we will see incremental gains on that, on decreasing the debt levy.
Well, if you look at,
Certainly, it would be nice to get rid of it all in one fell swoop, but I don't know that that's financially feasible.
well, our CIP actually, like I said, raises our debt to 65 million and comes back down to 60 million 10 years from now.
We have a chance to review the CIP this year in the next workshop. Any other discussion? All right. We'll call the question. All those in favor of resolution 2025-045, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Nate,
All right. Resolution passes 3-1.
Motion to approve the municipal services agreement with Northland Securities, Inc.
Second.
Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor of the, where's my, excuse me. Page moved. All those in favor to approve the municipal service agreement with Northland Securities, Inc., please signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Hearing none, motion passes. Item 14, approve plans and specifications and order ad for bids for I-94 lift station and Forcemain improvements, Resolution 2025-046.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I'm back before you tonight with an item to approve the plans and specifications for the lift station and Forcemain improvements to the I-94 lift station. As you recall, this is the Forcemain that runs along Hudson Boulevard and Inwood Avenue that has experienced a number of breaks over the last decade and has exceeded its useful service life. So I'm here asking for, to move to that next step and order bids. So just a few things tonight I'm gonna talk about. We'll go over the location, the scope, the schedule, and the budget. And then I also do have, it was just referenced here in the previous discussion, but there has been an addition to this project to replace a failing culvert that is right in close proximity with the lift station. The project, the culvert project, was a separate CIP project this year that we're simply adding now to take advantage of the fact that we're gonna be opening up the road to do this work. So we'll get to that too. So the location of the lift station is actually down on Hudson Boulevard, just east of Eagle Point Boulevard. And the force main runs from this lift station westward to Inwood Avenue and then south to an existing Met Council discharge location. So right now it ties in with the Met Council force main, and that's what it's going to do in an interim condition when it's reconstructed. But the Met Council has a project working towards this location with a gravity sewer line that this will ultimately discharge to. One thing, it's a little hard to see, I know, on the aerial. You'll notice that the red line, that's the existing path of the force main. There's a crossing of Inwood Avenue that is slightly farther south than what we're proposing now. And that is to, the existing line has to remain in service while we build the new one. So we need to offset that crossing in order to keep everything undisturbed. So we're replacing approximately 3,000 feet of the 8-inch force main. The 8-inch force main material is a PVC pipe. I think I shared some photos of the pipe condition in a previous presentation. And through analysis of ultimate flows in the area, we've determined that the line should actually be upsized to a 16-inch line. Now, that's 16-inch outside diameter, slightly smaller inside. But the pipe material we're going with this time is a high-density polyethylene. So this is a thicker walled material, and it's really the standard for all force mains that are bored in these days. The material that was put in before, I know there are some questions and concerns about that, so I just wanted to reassure council that we are using something different that should sustain and have a longer life. So the upsizing was based on a review of the ultimate service area. So all that area kind of north of the lift station eventually is going to come there. You know, it's only, the area's only been partially developed. So working with planning staff, you know, we determined that in order to meet the service, the future service flows, the 16-inch main was appropriate. We did also review the lift station components, the controls and electrical system, and it was determined that new pumps will be needed to control or to transmit the sewage in the new force main. Now, those pumps will not work with the existing force main, and the existing force main will not work with these new pumps. So that was originally, you may recall from a previous, from when we brought this item forward before, but that was previously something we were unsure of, and it was not included in the scope. That cost was not. I'll get to costs here farther down the presentation and talk about the plan to procure those pumps and what costs are associated with that. But the pumps will, the new pumps will be appropriate for the new line in the interim and final condition. And when I say interim, that's the new main hooked to the Met Council force main that exists today, which it will have to for some period of time, as well as when the gravity line is there for us to connect to. Lastly, during development of the Amira site, which is just north of Hudson Boulevard there, kind of where the lift station is, it was discovered that there was a 90-inch corrugated metal culvert going beneath Hudson Boulevard that was starting to rot out. And when I say rot out, I mean rust, crumple, collapse. And it was put into the CIP last year as an emergency project. And initially, you know, staff not knowing that these two projects would intersect like this, we're investigating a trenchless solution, so lining the pipe. Also working with the watershed district, it was determined that the pipe was oversized for what it actually needs to be. It does not need to be 90 inches. And through some analysis, it was determined a 72-inch pipe would serve the drainage needs of the area. So moving further, as the lift station project progressed, and we found out how the pipes are configured out there, it just made sense, since we have to open the road up to bring in the force main into the lift station, to also install this culvert while the road is closed, and just do one closure, get rid of everything, take care of everything, and then open it back up, so we should be good in the area for years to come. The big thing is the Forcemain actually goes underneath the existing 90-inch culvert, and it will need to go back underneath the new culvert, because if you think of 72 inches, that's how tall I am, okay? It's 6 feet. So there's not a lot of room between the roadbed and the top of this culvert. And so that pipe needs to continue underneath, otherwise we run into cover issues, and there's also just a web of utilities above it. So I'm back here before you today on June 17th, looking for plan authorization and bid authorization. If we move forward, we'll be accepting bids on July 8th, and then coming back to council on July 15th with a recommendation for contract award. The project is anticipated to start a couple weeks after that in early August, and be substantially complete by mid-October, with any sort of final completion by the end of the year. So at the time that I was preparing this presentation and council item, we didn't have really hard exacting costs for the improvements. We had our CIP budget for the Forcemain is $900,000, and for the culvert is $400,000, so $1.3 million. Now, knowing that we don't want to, those funds are specific for those improvements, you know, we really had to be careful. So I've just got some numbers I'll share with council. The total estimated project cost right now is about $940,000. So that's the Forcemain and the culvert. Splitting those out, the Forcemain is anticipated to be approximately $615,000, and the culvert approximately $325,000. When contingencies and engineering is applied across these projects equally, as it should prorate, it pretty much works out exactly to $900,000 and $400,000. The one thing on here that's not within this budget that I want to talk about is the pumps. So there are 3 pumps that need to be installed, 3 new pumps that need to be installed in the lift station. We have a quote from a pump supplier to sell those to us for $150,000. I anticipate coming back to council at a future meeting with a plan to procure those pumps and a little more information. But right now, that number, I just want to make very clear, is not included in this $1.3 million CIP number.
Was that one pump?
That's 3 pumps.
That was for 3?
Yep.
That was the price?
Yep. Before I get to the recommendation, I want to talk about this project in a little more detail. I'm going to jump back right to here. This is the best map I've got for us right now, because this will entail a fairly significant closure at the lift station site. The road, Hudson Boulevard, will need to be closed we're anticipating upwards of a month. So 3 to 4 weeks is a pretty rosy estimate, we think. But we think that closure will allow for both the culvert install as well as the installation of the Forcemain to the lift station and other work as necessary to adjust utilities. There is a traffic control plan that detours cars from Hudson Boulevard up Julia Avenue to 5th Street and over to Inwood. Now, you may be thinking, what about those businesses there, about the machine shed and those other buildings over there, the hotel? Westbound, westbound lanes on Hudson Boulevard between Inwood and Eagle Point Boulevard and Circle will remain open during construction. So there will be access there while the work is going on.
Just as a one-way or controlled?
That would be a one-way,
One-way.
but you'll be able to get out via Eagle Point up to 5th.
Okay.
Yep.
Nick, the schematic there shows
Mr.
the
Mayor.
new Forcemain underneath the roadway, but I'm assuming it's not gonna need to be underneath the roadway?
Actually, it is going to be underneath the roadway.
So all that road needs to be redone.
Nope, it's gonna be bored in.
Oh,
so there'll
that's
be
right.
pits. There'll be
That's right.
localized pits.
Okay.
Now, yeah, I'll speak to that a little bit, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. The issue is, there's been so many breaks on the existing force main that's a plastic pipe that it's virtually impossible to trace the location of that pipe and locate it. Public Works has, they know where breaks have occurred, but, you know, seeing as how the road's kind of got a curvilinear, you know, geometry as you come around there, we don't have good information where the existing force main is, and we have to make sure that that pipe stays in service while the new force main goes in. So as a factor of safety, we're moving that pipe into that northern part of the roadway.
Okay.
There will be, like I said, there will be limited patching, but a wholesale reconstruction of the road or even, you know, a large amount of replacement is not anticipated. And we are aware that's a new roadway, and this is a bummer, you know. With that, I'm asking council to consider approving a resolution, approving plans and specifications and ordering the advertisement for bids for the I-94 lift station force main improvements.
Questions for Mr. Stanley? Councilmember Hurd?
Did you include, what would the price look like if these were done at separate times? So if we decided not to do both at the same time, then what kind of price tag are we looking at for that culvert later on?
Right, so I'll say a couple things. Right now, I think I've mentioned this to council before this year, we're in a very favorable bidding environment all across the metro area. So and when you package these together, you get to take advantage of kind of an economy of scale, especially when you're talking about, you know, traffic control, patching the road, mobilization costs for a contractor to come in, and working around all the utilities that are gonna need to be worked around to put in this culvert. I think that if you separated the culvert out and did it under a separate project, and this culvert, I'll say again, is, you know, it needs to be replaced. It's rusted, it's rotting. It would cost more money. A standalone project for the culvert, you know, would definitely cost a little more. As far as the lift station goes, it's hard to say. It's kind of a specialty when we get into boring pipes, you know, large diameter force main. It's not something that every contractor does, but I definitely think that packaging them together, you'll get a more favorable price for both projects.
I know it's challenging, but I mean with the culvert, I mean, do you think, are we talking double the price? Are we talking 50%?
I don't know about double. I think you could assume anywhere between 15 and 20% though, you know, reasonably.
And kind of lifespan, if we didn't do it, when do you see it failing and needing to be replaced?
That's the million-dollar question, right? You know, the engineering that's been, and inspection that's been done on the pipe gives us, you know, gives us pause, because we can see the inside of the pipe, we can't see the deterioration on the outside of the pipe, and that's also a major factor here. We suspect there's voids that have developed because of, you know, when a pipe gets holes in it, moisture runs through those holes, and it just can create like an unstable condition around the pipe, which in turn can create an unstable condition in the roadway. So we feel like this open cutting and replacing the pipe is a much more, it gives us a higher degree of certainty of a successful rehabilitation than like lining the pipe. And lining the pipe, believe it or not, with a pipe that diameter or that size would probably be more expensive than just open cutting it in the situation we're in now.
And if it's, you know, again, I'm just thinking down the road, I don't know what, if the right term is if it fails, is that more of an emergency type situation where then we have to act quickly?
It absolutely becomes
bad-
an emergency.
Obviously not as much of a favorable bid at that point.
Right now, what we're doing is we're being intentional and proactive. And when you get put into an emergency situation, you're forced to be reactive.
Yeah.
And you're not able to do the best that you can. So that's why we're looking at this in the way we are now.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Stanley. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve resolution number 2025-046, approving the plans and specifications and ordering the advertisement for bids for the I-94 lift station and Forcemain improvements.
We have a motion and second discussion. Councilmember Dragisich.
I'd only point out the fallacy in our argument. It's okay to pay for the storm pipe replacement from the stormwater utility, but not the storm pipe replacements on the street improvement projects. Seems like there's, it's a convenience of choice, not, a clear and concise direction. And I'll let it go with that.
I guess I would agree. I didn't know that they were separately that way. And certainly we can address that future. We are at a time now when we don't really get a choice on fixing this. It's required, so I'm in favor of doing it, and your point is not lost on me, Councilmember Dragisich. Any other comments? Discussion? Councilmember Holtz.
I was just gonna say thank you to staff for, number one, being able to fast track this, do the due diligence on it to make sure that we are fully aware and cognizant of it, because the report was thorough, number one, because the public needs to know as well. Why is that road about to be closed for another month? Like, they're gonna be asking the questions, validly so. So there's a very thorough presentation, and we need that information. It still defies belief that Forcemain failed as many times as it did. It defies belief, and we had a thorough discussion about it last time around. We still don't know the answers, and that's the troubling part, but the fact that it's going to the 16-inch and now is, as far as we can tell, the best material now in the year 2025, that's what we have to do. I'd rather do it right the first time, well, second time now, but this is what we do.
Better not be a third time's the charm thing.
Seriously, don't. But I do appreciate staff's time on this, because it needs to be done correctly.
I'll just add, and thank you for answering the questions and just try to get a little bit more information. And because it is, it's always one of those, do we want to do it now? Do we want to wait? And usually this is the situation where if the opportunity presents itself and that repair is going to be needed in the near future, and like you said, could be more of an emergent situation. I think being proactive, unfortunately, it's a $400,000 proactive decision, but probably better than what it would be if 2-3 years down the road and then more road closures and the hassle with that. So I do appreciate the proactivity and the proactive approach in seeing that and including this in the presentation tonight.
All right. I'll call the question. All those in favor of resolution number 2025-046, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion passes. Item number 15, Inwood, 8th edition, preliminary plat, PUD, and comprehensive plan amendment. Ordinance 2025-12, resolution 2025-048, 2025-049, and 2025-050.
All right, good evening, Mayor, members of the council. So we're here tonight to talk about Inwood Townhomes, or Inwood 8th edition of Inwood, rather. A preliminary plat, planned unit development, and comprehensive plan amendment have been requested by M&I Homes. So just to talk a little bit more precisely about the planned unit development request, this project has come forward with a request for private roads and some other flexibility requests for the townhome units that are proposed with this part of the project. Getting into the land use side of things here, the zoning map is up on the screen. Currently, this entire project area is zoned high-density residential. It is shown to have a PUD overlay currently, although I will note that as staff have gone back and reviewed all of the approvals for this area, there are no existing PUD flexibilities or benefits that were previously granted through other approvals. So you're looking at effectively kind of like a fresh opportunity with this PUD for those flexibilities. We've also looked at the shoreland overlay, understanding there's a small amount of the project area in that the city shoreland overlay, and have effectively ruled out issues with that part of the ordinance. On the comprehensive plan side of things, this site in the city's 2030 comprehensive plan was guided for what was then called urban high density, which allowed a mix of units between a range of 7.5 and 15 units per acre. The 2040 comprehensive plan kind of split the guidance for this area into a mix of different categories, including the high-density residential district, the mixed-use commercial district, and the business park district. And so this project is requesting to bring everything back to the same future land use guidance, which is now called high-density residential. And the density range, the ceiling of that density range is the same as it was in the prior comp plan. So looking at the background, Inwood was, at the time it was approved, the largest PUD that the city had approved at that point. It was to be built in a number of different phases. Initially, it was approved in December of 2014. There was an EAW, an environmental assessment worksheet that was completed for the project and is still considered to be in effect. At that time, the EAW envisioned a number of different units in the areas that weren't single-family detached, so you can see those on the screen. In short, it anticipated more units than are proposed now. Inwood first through fifth editions, those are the single-family parts of the project. They were approved and have been built largely within the span of 2015 to 2017. And Inwood sixth edition was and is the Quick Trip site. So on the screen, you can see the proposed preliminary plat. You can see one lot for the proposed apartment building that's on the west side of the project, and then all of the individual attached townhome lots. Here's another plan view. This is the landscaping plan. It kind of shows you a little bit more of the spacing on the development. We'll talk about some of the particulars here that are being proposed as I get through the presentation. Looking at the PUD minimum criteria, this project does meet those standards for a PUD. The city also has objectives that PUDs have to meet in its ordinance, and so those are shown on the screen, and we can talk about those if you have any questions about which ones would apply. In reviewing the preliminary plat, we look at a variety of different standards, as you know, starting with land use, the bulk standards like setbacks and that type of thing, landscaping, grading, stormwater, wetlands, public infrastructure, and parks, to name a few. Looking at the bulk standards, there are a couple of requirements that are shown in blue that are being requested for flexibility. This is not very uncommon with the way that this type of townhome development is being platted, where you have individual lots that are surrounding the individual attached townhome units. The multifamily dwelling, the apartment building, is on a lot that is basically too small, according to the city code, at approximately 1,600 square feet per unit. And I would also point out that the impervious surface coverage for the attached townhome side of the project, the entire project is about 60%, which is under the city's maximum. But on an individual basis, those units, which have a small lot around them, are higher at about 84% of the top end. We have a couple of setbacks, flexibilities that are requested in order to plat the development in this manner. There's also, lastly here, a setback to a public road, 5th Street North. That's from the front of the units to the actual curb. That flexibility is being requested for, but because of the orientation of those units, staff do not have concerns with that setback. The buildings will actually front all of the public streets that surround this project. So here you can see the units that are proposed are double fronted, meaning that for example, on the 5th Street North side of the project, you'll have the units facing with a public kind of face towards the public street corridor. And then internal to the development, that's where you have the kind of the rear loaded, we'll call it, townhomes. So this project was informed by some of the specific performance standards that are in the city's ordinance and in the design standards manual. For single-family attached townhomes, Buildings need to be smaller than 10 units without a CUP, front a public street, or receive a conditional use permit. No parking's allowed in front yards, and shared open spaces have to be equal to or greater than 300 square feet per unit. For apartment buildings, parking cannot be located in front yard areas, and common open spaces also need to be provided for those units. Here's your design standards manual, so we look at both site and building design. Getting into just the attached townhomes for design, those are shown on the screen in that red box. So thinking about the building placement, the project has been revised over the course of the review period, starting in basically in the new year and up until now, to make sure that the project most closely is able to meet or conform with the city standards. So the building placement was one of those points of conversation. The buildings are now oriented towards the public street wherever it's possible. The unit types are basically those double-fronted units in order to do that. Interior to the development, the entrances of the buildings aren't on a public street because the development will have private streets. In terms of the streetscape, concrete sidewalks are available to all units, but they don't necessarily run along a public street. There is a more traditionally designed street that runs through this development that was added as part of a redesign. So buildings along most of the other streets will have driveways facing the private road. In terms of landscaping, we think about preservation of the existing trees along that 5th Street North corridor, in addition to having overstory trees where we can include them in the actual internal to the attached townhome area. So here is one rendering of those attached townhome units. When we look at the actual building design standards for those units, we're looking at the form and the facade, the materials for the project or the buildings. In this case, the project is showing us colors that generally are consistent with the code, but when we looked at the actual materials that are proposed, that's where we have an issue. So the city's design standards manual is pretty specific as it relates to the actual materials that can be put on a townhome unit or any type of unit that's proposed in an HDR area. Well, I'll talk about that in more detail. The other parts of the design review for these units appear to be acceptable according to the manual. So on the screen, you see this was another rendering of the attached townhome units that was provided. It's kind of tough to see on the screen, but there is a kind of a delineation in the materials. Anything that's shown in white is a fiber cement product that would be consistent with the manual. What is shaded in purple is vinyl siding. Vinyl siding is in a list of materials in the city's design standard manual that are prohibited as like a primary facade material. In some cases, cities might try to interpret their design standards to say, like, if it's primary, that means it's just 51%. It's got to be a majority of the facade. In this case, that's not how staff interpret the manual. We have a list of prohibited materials from being included as a primary material on a facade, whether it's 10% or 100. Those materials include vinyl siding. They also include unpainted galvanized metal, corrugated metal, plain unpainted or painted concrete block, or prefabricated concrete panels. So those are the types of materials that we would not really want in any amount on a primary facade. So being that vinyl was included in that list, that is why staff identified this in the review, and at this point have a condition of approval requiring that the vinyl be switched out with a conforming material. As to what other materials that the developer has that they can incorporate, I would have to have them speak to that question, and certainly they'd be happy to speak to that. I know they're here tonight. So looking at the apartment building, we reviewed this also for conformance. It was a little bit more straightforward. The building, streetscape, landscaping, and parking all meet. Here you see another rendering of that apartment building. When we reviewed the architectural plans, the form, facade, building materials, and other elements of the building all meet the city standards.
Was there a rendering of that from 5th Street?
They may have included it somewhere in the packet, but in the application materials, but it will look very similar from Fifth Street. There will be no parking between the building and the road, and you'll have a sidewalk and landscaping between the road and the building. But no, I don't have anything on in the
Okay.
presentation. So parkland dedication, this development does, as you know, create a demand for parks and trails. There are 2 nearby parks to this project, Ivywood and Stonegate. There are no existing trail corridors that would require connections to be made by this development. So the Parks Commission did review this earlier this year and recommended cash in lieu of parkland dedication for this project. Moving on to tree preservation and landscaping. Tree preservation is very simple. There are no trees to be removed, so there's no mitigation. In terms of landscaping, the overall project, you can see the landscaping plan on the screen here. The overall project meets the number of plantings that are required. One of the things that's been a point of conversation is overstory trees along the boulevards of the public streets and private roads. The private roads having so many driveways on them precludes the ability to meet that 50-foot spacing of overstory trees. But because a more traditionally designed street was run through the attached townhome area, we are suggesting a requirement to have that be planted with 50-foot spacing, so at least some part of that part of the development can meet. Another thing I want to mention is buffering. So when we reviewed this site, we noticed that the Bremer Financial site to the south doesn't have any screening or landscaping of any kind. There is a power line easement area that runs through that part of the city, so it's natural that there may not be trees there, but being that there's a large parking lot, it felt like maybe there should be some screening, and so the developer actually did go back to the drawing board in their resubmittal and provide screening in the new plans. Parking and circulation, so this site has, in short, enough parking with the uses that are proposed. The visitor parking for the townhomes is a common question that's provided in the driveways for those units, and there is on-street parking in the private drives throughout the townhome area. A note on access and circulation. There are existing access points along Fifth Street North and Island Trail, or no, just Fifth Street North, sorry. That's being used by this development. Island Trail will receive basically an approved access location by the engineering review. There will be turn lanes required along that corridor. And lastly, staff are recommending pedestrian connections. The southeast and southwest parts of the attached townhome part of this development lack a little bit of connectivity to the surrounding sidewalk network. So a lot of review comments here. The city's fire department, engineer, landscape architect all reviewed and provide comment memos. The watershed district also did provide comments. Because this is a comp plan amendment, we circulated it to all affected and adjacent jurisdictions and got all of the appropriate comment memos. Basically, there's no comment from any adjacent jurisdiction. This slide summarizes the flexibilities that are being requested by the developer for the project. We can get into this in more detail if you would like. I've mentioned all of these throughout the presentation. I also mentioned staff's design concerns, but they're summarized here. So number one, actually I didn't mention this one. The parallel parking is suggested where on the plans it was shown to have 90-degree parking in the attached townhome. There are a few areas in the attached townhome part of the development that the angled parking doesn't work very well. So that can get fixed, and I think the developer's working on that now. I've mentioned the other two pieces here, the sidewalk connectivity and building materials. So the council's options this evening, approval with conditions, and denial. Because of the long review timeline associated with the resubmittal, we're at the very end of our review period. The statutory deadline for 120 days ended on June 14th. However, the developer did extend the review period through this evening in order to be able to get a decision from the council. At this point in time, staff are comfortable with recommending approval to you with conditions. There are 15 conditions that are proposed if you do that. Most of them are pretty standard. Some of the unique conditions are things that I've already discussed: parking, sidewalk connectivity, vinyl siding, and landscaping. The Planning Commission had a public hearing on April 14th. Generally speaking, the public had a number of comments, a lot of them related to traffic, frankly, along Fifth Avenue in particular, vehicle speeds, those types of things. There was also a conversation about where people can cross to get to the parks nearby. And there's also comments on the stormwater reuse system that I believe was retroactively added to the Inwood project to the north. Ultimately, the Planning Commission recommended approval 5-0 of the comprehensive plan amendment and 4-1 of the preliminary plat and PUD. So I do have some example motions for you up on the screen. These would, of course, approve the project as proposed with conditions. Resolutions are in the staff report if you need the number. I would also mention that the applicant is here this evening and did have a presentation for you that they'd like to talk about. So with that, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Questions for Mr. First? Councilmember Holtz?
A lot of information. Let's just start with irrigation. So the plan mentions that it's not proposed at this time to utilize stormwater reuse. Obviously, there is already in place to the north.
Yep.
That I presume also means there's no plan to use stormwater reuse that's developed on the southern side?
Yeah, so that's a good question and something that staff did raise through the review process. As you probably know, there's the regional ponding for this site. The stormwater pond is located just west of this subject property. We've mentioned that to the developer, and I think that'd be a great question for them as to whether they have plans to incorporate that.
Fantastic. What are your thoughts then, because I agree with the concerns that were raised regarding, I'm gonna stop there because that's a comment. What are your thoughts then on getting people across Fifth Street to access parks? Because there are no stoplights in those locations. There are no traffic signals along Fifth Street at either of those two intersections. And obviously, we have our new crosswalk policy, but what are our thoughts as to improvements?
Yeah, this is the part where I get over my skis and have to look at the engineering folks, but I think I'd just start by saying I know that Fifth Street North is intended to be a higher traffic volume corridor, so I think to some degree that needs to be kind of understood. To that effect, I know that the city has a crosswalk policy and don't really know exactly how that might impact this particular area, so I don't know if the city engineer has any comments.
Mayor and Council, I would actually have to review the policy. I haven't had a chance yet, being kind of new to the role, and come back to you with some sort of recommendations or ideas.
I would also add that because the road is curbed in some areas, it would have to be something that's thought through, like a thoughtful suggestion to where crossing should go.
Absolutely, because obviously by the quick trip, you have the curve on the eastern side of this, you're just coming up from a 90-degree curve. Obviously, the most gentle one is going to be on the western side, but it is something that will have to be addressed. And presumably, when the time comes, it likely is going to qualify for a crosswalk based upon the numbers that we have, but we would still have a study done to show the number of people. But the problem is, I don't want to have a study in this case showing 800 kids cross Fifth Street with no crosswalk, therefore we need a crosswalk. I don't want to be at the point where that's after the fact, because we know it's going to happen. I'd rather be a bit more proactive on this one, but that would be my 2 cents. I'll reserve questions for after others.
Could we add a conditional approval for the crosswalk, based on the study? Could that be a conditional approval if the council discussed it? Is that something that could be added as a condition? So I know the study has to be done, but we
Yeah.
have that laid out, what the parameters are, and then if it shows that a crosswalk needs to go in based on our policy,
Yeah.
that has to happen.
Yeah, I don't see why it necessarily couldn't be added. The question that I would have, I suppose, is what is the type of crosswalk that's installed? And
Correct.
what is the cost, so that we just understand what we're requiring.
Okay.
But beyond that, I don't know if there would be any concern with adding a condition like that.
Because the hard part is, when it got installed this past 2 times, it was based upon study of activity that is already occurring. Right now, there's no people living on the
sure.
south side, so
Yeah.
you'd be studying nothing.
Well, that's why you do a traffic study.
Yes, it'd
Would
be hypothetical,
It's
yeah.
a hypothetical on number of vehicles, number of people.
There was a, I'll call it like an amended traffic study that was resubmitted with this project that basically, stated that the traffic volumes that would be generated by this project were at or below what was initially projected for Inwood, but, beyond that, I can't speak to the study.
Okay, and then a couple clarifying questions here. So then with the tree situation, just make sure I'm understanding that correctly. They have quantity-wise, based on the acreage, enough trees, but the concern is they're not meeting the 1 tree per 50 feet on the boulevard. Staff is recommending that they do stick with that.
Yeah, I think we've gotten to a point where staff's pretty comfortable with the landscaping that's proposed. There are enough trees to satisfy the city's requirements, but to your point, the private drives it's difficult to meet the 50-foot spacing requirement with these attached townhomes because you've got 6 units that have, 20 or so foot driveway each with 5-foot spacing between, and so that's a pretty wide swath of the private drive that you can't plant a tree. They do have trees interspersed between the buildings where they can. In addition to that, staff are thinking that they very well could provide some type of landscaping that's not necessarily a tree planting between the driveways. So they did revise the plans and include a more traditionally designed street, we'll call it, through the development that can and will, through these conditions, have 50-foot spacing for those boulevard trees. So you'll at least have one boulevard that kind of runs through the spine of the attached townhome area that meets.
Okay, and then on the buffering and screening, so like on page 7, it talks about the, just wanna make sure I'm saying this right. Maybe it's not even there, my computer's going slow, but there was the change, it sounds like, from when this was presented to the planning commission to here, where the garage door location has changed from the front to the
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, to just clarify, the city received an initial application in like February that was complete. We processed that at the first planning commission we had was the April meeting. At that time, we had identified some issues with the design, which included the lack of buffer, and there were also units that kind of backed up against the Bremer use. And the plans were then revised and resubmitted. We looked at them with the planning commission again in May, and that's where we had now this switch. The garage doors for the units, maybe you can see the cursor on the screen if I move it around. Okay, maybe not. The private drive that runs on the south of the attached townhome site, that now has units that have their garages pointed towards the Bremer lot, which
Is, so
helps
that's
the
that
buffer.
street C that you're talking about?
This street D at the
D.
bottom. If you can
Oh,
kind of
down
squint
there,
at the,
okay.
yeah. So that's where those garage doors open up towards Bremer, and it just, the site's not oriented towards Bremer anymore, so it helps, I think, to kind of buffer those two uses.
And then, so then my next question is about the private drives, which on there, I'm assuming that's like street A, B, C, D, E. I guess if you could just help me understand that a little bit, I guess, what is the implications of that? How does that, like with the sidewalk policy, with snow removal,
Yeah.
with tax levies in the future for or for, any repairs? How does that work? Are the residents of this property paying 100% of that levy then? How does that work?
That's a great question. So, yeah, private drives are actually permitted through a conditional use permit in the city's ordinance. This project came in with a PUD, and so we would simply permit private drives through that tool instead of requiring a separate approval. The implication of private drives is, number one, this project will have an HOA that manages the entire property, so all snow removal, landscaping, all of that is handled by that entity. The HOA is also responsible for the long-term maintenance costs of all of the infrastructure on the site.
Do we have any other neighborhoods or developments that have utilized that?
Yeah, there are a handful. I can't name them unfortunately off the top of my head, but I do know that there are a few that are existing in the community.
Any issues that have arisen from that, that you're aware of?
I don't know. I think, with private drives, the issue can sometimes be in the long term
Yeah.
when things begin to fail, and I'm not sure we're there yet with any of our developments.
Sure.
Cimarron has all private drives.
Yeah, similar.
Cimarron has all private
Someone
drives.
has all private drives, okay.
It's working out well.
Councilmember Holtz.
In terms of sewer and water, so utilities with private roads, where are the utilities going?
So we have public utilities that run through the site under the private drive. There will be easements for the city to have those utilities running through the site.
And they're going under the road,
They're
not
going-
necessarily maybe sidewalk,
Yep.
curb?
No, it's under the roads, and so the city engineer had the developer submit a cross-section of the private roads with the application to better understand, do we have enough space, right? Because we need a wide enough easement to ensure that we can maintain these utilities, get in and fix them if we need to. At this point, I believe we're satisfied with what we have in terms of the width of those easement corridors.
In the hypothetical where a repair has to occur, because it's not our street, but we have an easement, who pays for the street repair when a digging has to occur?
That one I'm gonna have to look at Nate on.
That actually hasn't been a point of discussion. Just as you started speaking, I knew you were going that direction.
I didn't know I was going that direction,
So-
but I'm glad you did.
Yeah, I think we're on the same wavelength then. But that's a point of discussion. I honestly, here's the way it works with when we are in county right-of-way, we're there by permit. That's a little different. So if we need to excavate something, we get into county road, we have to repair the county road or pay to repair it. But in an instance where we are there by easement, and there's an improvement on top of it, I'm not exactly sure. That might be something that still needs to get worked out.
Any experience?
Typically, I've only dealt from the public side repairing it, and if it's a private road, I haven't had that experience. Have you?
I have not on a private road, but generally when you have easement across private property, if you have to excavate to repair, you're responsible for restoring a property. I have not had any under private
I know that
street.
utilities generally, if they, let's say it's Excel buried or something like that, and they're crossing a city street, Excel is responsible for repairing that, right? So,
Is it, my only, and that's logical, that's kind of what I would have presumed. My concern 25 years from now is, what if they, as an HOA, have not properly maintained the streets, we're digging it up to repair a sewer, all of a sudden, are we responsible for bringing it back to where it was, or for actually, we're kind of fixing that section too? And so that there could be a cost difference down the road again, 25 years from now, but
that's something would be addressed in a developer's agreement?
Yeah, I would say that would be subject to the agreement where they grant the easement. We would have to dictate who is responsible for repairing and to what extent. Usually you repair it to the condition it exists when you tear it up.
tear it up.
Yeah, have you run into this before, council?
Mr. Mayor, or members of the council, I have run into it. I mean, usually it is that we restore it to the condition that it was in, but we could craft the easement so that it makes it clear that they're going to be responsible for restoring it.
Yeah, I think if it's our utility that fails, I'm okay with that, but that we repair it to what it is in kind.
Yeah, yeah, I have no issue with us repairing it, it's our utility. It's just not fixing it above and beyond what it was.
Yeah.
Right.
We're not there to fix their streets above and beyond what it was.
At the time the repair was made.
Yes.
Could you just also point out in there, I was having a little trouble with the sidewalk, where that's gonna be located on?
Sure.
this
So,
plan?
the one area where it seems like there's a lack of connectivity is, again, on the attached townhome side of this project, on the southeast and southwest corners. See if I can get the cursor to show up on the screen. Having a hard time with that.
Is that
Um,
sections like,
So-
what are they labeled, 1 and 2 there?
Yeah, if you look at so Street D is that street that runs along
Yeah.
the south side of the project, where that street on the west side of Street D, where that curves to the north,
Yeah,
it looks like there wants to be or should be a pedestrian crossing.
yeah,
There is a sidewalk that terminates on the, I'll call it the east side of Street D, where it curves to the north in that location, and it kind of dead ends. And so getting folks over to the Island Trail corridor is kind of what I'm thinking. And in order to walk south at this point, the way it's designed, they have to go north. So they have to go around a block, basically around the block to stay on the sidewalk.
Is it the dashed line? Is that
I'm thinking, yeah.
the dashed line?
Yeah, depends on what dash line you're.
Sorry,
looking
yeah.
at.
If you hit escape, you should be able to make it smaller, and then we'll be able to see the
Yeah,
mouse.
okay, that's a great, that's a
Oh, there
great
we go.
point. Okay, so where the cursor is right now, there appears to me to be kind of a lack of continuity from the sidewalk that ends about here. And so just punching it through here, getting it over to this Island Trail corridor so that people can go south or north more easily, because you have a fair amount of people that live along this street D.
Sure.
There's the dotted line I was thinking about.
You have great vision then.
Thanks.
On the east side of the project, it's kind of the same story. You have a good sidewalk connectivity that goes up to about this location along the Fifth Street North corridor. But how about getting folks kind of more directly straight to the east to connect to that existing sidewalk?
And
along
with Fifth Street, is there already a sidewalk or trail on Fifth Street?
There is.
Is that on the south side?
It is on the south side.
Okay.
Yeah.
North and
So this would
south.
connect right in.
North and south?
Yeah.
It would connect right into an existing network.
And then with the crosswalk discussion, obviously on Fifth Street there, I mean, is there a preference too for, I guess that comes back to the study, maybe?
Yeah, here's maybe in this image, you can see that part of the area, this is an existing aerial, and you can see kind of, that's a pretty tight turn or curve. I'm, without more review, not quite sure where you'd want to locate a crossing here, so.
Other than Island
At
Lake,
the intersections is
Yeah.
what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Island Lake is the one where you have the most visibility, both
Yeah.
west, north.
I don't think you wanna cut across the median of the mid curve. That doesn't.
Don't wanna risk that, no.
Seem very safe.
no. So, yeah, this is just more of a connectivity question for me, and I think just making sure that it's easy for people to get out into whatever destination they want to get to in the
Yeah.
community.
Any further questions? No?
Developer here?
Did the applicant wanna say something? Present something?
Thank you. Mayor and Council, thank you for your consideration of this project. My name is Emily Becker. I'm with MI Homes. So as Nathan alluded to, there has been a number of changes that we've made since the last Planning Commission meeting that we first presented at. And before that, we have been working with staff since about July 1st of last year, going through a number of renditions with the project. So this is the first plan that we had presented at the April Planning Commission meeting. With the revised submittal, as Nathan had talked about, one of the biggest changes is we had a 28-foot wide street going through the center of the development, which, as we reluctantly like to admit, it is a better design, so we do thank staff for that. That will allow the entrance to showcase the front of the buildings as opposed to a sea of driveways and garages. We removed the stub streets. We, as Nathan had mentioned, we replaced all the front-loaded carriage product with our city collection, which is a rear-loaded product. So they're all going to be that city collection. We added a number of landscape features, one that's within the center of the development, and then at the northwest corner of the townhome lot, we are going to try our best to mimic the entrance landscaping that's within the single-family portion of the development, just to allow for a nice entrance. We did align the access points on the east and west of Island Trail, and we will add turn lanes. This is just to show how the landscaping currently looks within the single-family portion of the Inwood development. As Nathan had mentioned, there were concerns from the Planning Commission about traffic. Just to reiterate, Island Trail was designed and constructed as a minor collector street, designed to handle the multifamily portion of the whole entire comprehensive plan of this community. And also, as Nathan had mentioned, we did have a traffic engineer do an analysis of the 2014 traffic study that was completed and compare it to today's numbers and how it would look like with the proposed numbers of the development. And as you can see, it's significantly lower than what was anticipated in 2014, ranges in 9 to 42% lower than what was anticipated with that study. This again just sums up, it's saying that the numbers are lower than what was anticipated. It's well within Washington County's planning level. And most of the traffic is gonna come from the south, from I-94 and retail, and the west, I-94 and retail. Another point that Nathan had brought up, we do have some respectfully differences in opinions on the interpretation of the Lake Elmo standards and guidelines. Staff believes that vinyl siding is prohibited, but it does state that it's prohibited as a primary facade material. So we are absolutely willing to make a compromise, and we would utilize hardy where the board and batten is shown. So in this depiction, it would be where the white is. The hardy would be where the white is, and the vinyl would be where that periwinkle purple color is shown. So that's gonna account for about 33% of the front and about 37% of the rear and 42% of the entire product. So there's a couple reasons for this, that we're pushing to allow vinyl, at least on a portion of the building. One is maintenance. So with hardy siding, it does require to be caulked and painted in order to prevent moisture, which of course causes damage, which then in turn adds cost to the HOA. And obviously it adds cost to the units, which is going to be obviously passed down to potential residents. It's about $7,000 more a unit to cover the entire building with hardy, which I know it's kind of not great for a developer to be talking about costs, but at the same time, it is something that we know within the market that buyers don't see value in it. So they're gonna be paying $7,000 essentially for nothing that they see value in. And then there was a question about stormwater reuse with the irrigation. Did want to address that. So we did hear staff, and we understand, you know, the importance of stormwater reuse with the whole comprehensive plan of Inwood. We do have stormwater reuse. We did install it with the single family portion of the development. I think it took a number of years for us to kind of figure out with city staff on how that could get approved. It wasn't utilized for a number of years. I think it's utilized now, but that was after we left as a declarant. And then additionally, these outlots were platted, not considering stormwater reuse at that time. So I don't think that there's even capacity. The townhomes don't drain to that outlot that's to the west of the apartment site. So essentially, I just don't think that there's gonna be capacity or even a possibility at this time to utilize stormwater reuse. So I think that was all of the questions that were for me. So if you have any further questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Councilmember Holtz.
Well, welcome back to Lake Elmo. Where do these parcels drain to for watershed?
I believe it's north of Fifth Street to that, to Pondine near the park, I believe.
So there's culverts going under Fifth to get there?
I'm not sure. I would have to verify that, but I know it does, the townhome, the east portion of Island Trail does not drain to that outlot that's to the west of Island Trail.
And the outlot to the west is owned by the city.
Correct, which we deeded to the city at the time of the master plan.
I guess I can't recall a time when we had a preliminary plat where there wasn't any ponding at all on the site. Well, other question would have been, so there's a couple, I wouldn't call them large green open spaces, but if, I know there's the power lines on the south. I assume that means literally both those two parcels, like they're 0.4 acres and 0.5 acres. No use is allowed whatsoever on those.
Correct.
But on the apartment site, like, there's a little bit of green space on the northwest side of it, and within your proposed design, there's a couple green spaces along the main corridor. Is there any plan for any type of activity?
I believe, I mean, there's obviously
Whether it's
that landscape feature that's within the townhome site that's to the east of Island Trail. We could certainly add benches. I'm not sure what other sort of activities we would add to the apartment site.
I mean, off the top of my head, I mean, basketball courts are not significantly large. I mean, obviously playgrounds are large, but I would just be curious, like, what are some of the small features that can be done in isolated areas? Just because it is going to be, if it's approved, it's a significant challenge to get people across Fifth. And they're going to, whether there's a crosswalk or not. Kids don't, for my kids, they're not going to listen anyway, but we have a responsibility to make sure that those safety components are in place, but they're still going to go there. So any and all opportunities to add assets and features on the south side of Fifth is advantageous and helps for their safety.
Yeah, I mean, we'd definitely be willing to work with staff to add small recreational features within that open space.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hearn.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Can you just maybe talk a little bit from the developer standpoint on, you know, obviously the western portion zoned for the mixed-use commercial, why the desire to move away from that to switch that to HDR? Maybe if we could start there, and a couple other questions kind of around that point as
Yeah,
well.
so I was actually working with the city at the time of the comprehensive plan amendment that changed that from HDR to mixed-use commercial. I think originally the thought process was with mixed-use commercial that there could be some more flexibility in uses of that particular parcel. However, since that time, the Metropolitan Council changed their, I don't know if you would say interpretation or guidelines, I'm not really sure, but that you can't mix across different land use designations density. Prior to a couple years ago, I don't know if it was in the past year, but at the time of adoption of that comprehensive plan, you could mix densities across parcels, so.
So it was more to do with the Met Council's
Yeah,
interpretation
yes,
versus.
it was originally the thought, again, the thought process when that was amended was just to provide more flexibility on use of that particular parcel. It wasn't for really anything else.
Okay, is staff anything on that you can add on?
Yeah, I would add that that's correct. So the Met Council does not allow for density to blend unless you're in the same future land use category. So the apartment side of this project is a little heavy density-wise. It might be over 15 units per acre. The townhome side is a little bit lighter. They balance out, but in order to blend them, you have to have the same future land use category. So that's part of the reason why staff is comfortable with the future land use amendment that's proposed.
So it would be more for being able to increase the density on that western portion versus there was no demand for commercial units or?
Yeah, I think to be fair, the city in 2014 approved the Inwood PUD and kind of vision. And knowing then what we know now about the Met Council's guidelines and rules.
Kept it as one.
It would have been wise to keep it as one because we would know that, you know, this mix of uses is coming forward as is expected based on the plan that was approved.
Sure.
So we probably would have guided it in that way to begin with, had we known.
Okay,
So,
that makes sense.
Yep.
Sorry if I keep going. If you could, so maybe, I know we had the discussion about the private versus the public roads. Again, from a developer standpoint, if you could talk us through why you'd prefer to go that direction versus having it be city-owned?
Yeah, there's a number of reasons for that. So, I mean, first and foremost, I'm gonna be honest, it does provide a little bit more flexibility in setbacks. That was the number one reason. However, there are also added benefits to that. First of all, from an HOA standpoint, yes, does the HOA have to pay for plowing? Yes, but they also get plowed probably quicker than what a public street would. So there's that added benefit. Also, we are willing to haul out snow as opposed to just, shove it anywhere we can find. It just allows for better services. And yeah, I think that those are the main reasons.
And how does that, I mean, as far as like, you know, early on when the units are still, you know, you're not at full capacity, how is that covered? The reason I bring this up is a lot of the HOAs and developments, there's been a lot of issues brought up
Yep.
before the HOAs turned over to the residents.
Yep,
And there's a lot
so-
of issues of the things that they were promised getting done. And
Yeah,
that's
how
usually the
it's set-
situation is
Yeah,
early on.
it's set up, it's obviously anticipated in this many number of years, the street's gonna need to be replaced, or there's gonna need to be certain improvements, and that's all anticipated within the budget, and then we set up the assessments or dues based on that, and then when it's first getting started, we as the developer have to pay those shortfalls to account for,
The plowing,
correct,
maintenance, okay.
yes.
All right, do I have to keep going?
Yep.
Okay. And then if you could just talk with the variances that are being requested, talk us through a little bit as far as like why those are needed. From the PUD, you know, the PUD is intended to be, it's not intended for just increasing density. And so with those variances, they're increasing density. So if you can talk me through, help me understand better why those variants are needed versus decreasing the density.
Yeah,
and
well,
not
I'll start
requiring
with
the
the private
variances.
streets, of course, so that I already have spoken to. The setback along Fifth Street, you know, one of the guidelines within the city's guidelines and standards is that they want buildings as close to the public street as possible in order to create, you know, a better neighborhood. So that flexibility is we're looking for. The tree spacing, I mean, as Nathan kind of alluded to, some of that isn't able to be met because of utilities. There is a little nuance within the code that does allow for clustered areas of those trees in the case that that spacing is not able to be met. I think that those were the main.
I'm sorry, did you mention the minimum lot size for the multifamily apartment buildings? Was that,
Yeah, I mean, one of the, it was already platted that way, and I don't even know if those standards were in place at the time.
okay.
It was platted as an apartment building. In fact, it's actually less than what was anticipated with the original development.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Holtz.
Nathan. So regarding vinyl and materials, and I'm hearing a bit of a difference of opinion here, but in our conditions of approval and moving forward, it seems like we're still saying there's no vinyl.
That's correct. Staff are proposing a condition of approval that would require the developer to revise their plans and remove vinyl as a facade material.
In exchange for getting a PUD.
Correct.
Okay. Anything else?
Not as a question.
All right, then I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adopt resolution 2025 dash
048.
048, right? Approving the comprehensive plan amendment request by MI Homes for the subject property with the findings and conditions herein. Therein.
Second.
Did you say second?
Second.
All right. Discussion. Councilmember Holtz.
In terms of the comp plan amendment, I mean, to me, this is logical. It's not about approving a development yet or not, but the argument's pretty straightforward. I guess it makes sense that if at the time in 2014, we knew then what we knew now, So I get it, that makes sense. I don't have an issue for the comp plan amendment per se.
Was this the same site when we were on planning commission? They came with like a 4-story apartment building? No, that was a different location.
I didn't even live in the city yet at that time. This is 2014.
No, but there was something, there was a council member that was not a fan of what was being proposed. I thought that was across the street, was it? Are you remembering the same thing?
You might remember better than me, though.
Am I remembering it correctly, council?
Mr. Mayor, I do remember there being an apartment building proposed.
But I think it was-
Sometime after 2014,
Yeah, it was
and people were upset about it. I think it was due to the size.
for the size. I think it was 4-story or
Yeah.
something larger.
I must have been gone that meeting. I literally have no memory.
Of that.
Yeah.
I mean, that,
I have no memory.
just to clarify.
Wait a minute.
If you didn't have a memory, we'd have problems.
As far as for the comprehensive plan, kind of like Councilmember Holtz mentioned there, I'm fine with that. I guess, I know we've had this discussion a lot about, bringing in more commercial is obviously nice for the city, so it would have been nice to see that, but that's good, clarity as far as when this was originally put together, why that was, and how the Met Council's interpretation of that can make it challenging, so I have no issue approving the comprehensive plan amendment here.
All right, well, I'm gonna call the question on the comprehensive plan resolution. All those in favor to adopt resolution 2025-048, approving the comprehensive plan amendment request by M&I Homes for the subject property with findings and conditions therein, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Resolution 2025-048 is approved. Anybody want to make a motion on the preliminary plat?
Move to adopt resolution 2025-049, approving the preliminary plat and PUD for the Inwood Townhome Development, requested by M&I Homes with the findings and conditions therein.
Discussion.
Need a second.
I'll give you a second. Yeah, Councilmember Hearn.
Yeah, I have concerns with this. I don't see myself voting for, and I think I've been pretty consistent with this in any development, where if the density is above the minimum limit, and variances are being requested, I can't put those two together. I feel like
Above the maximum limit or minimum limit?
so we've had like one situation where without variances, they wouldn't have been able to achieve the minimum
Oh, okay, yeah,
density,
all right.
right? And in this situation, they're sitting above the minimum density, so they have room to decrease it.
Okay.
So I'd rather see the density decreased, not have to ask for variances.
Got it.
Again, PUD is not intended to increase density. And I guess it's hard for me to look at these variance requests and not see it as for that. I think there's some great points as far as some changes that were made to make the design better. I think those things could be maintained as the density is decreased. So that's just where I stand. I've been pretty consistent with that, where if there's room for the density to decrease, I can't vote for a variance.
Clarifying question. So this net density is 14.06, and with the comp plan amendment, it's 8 to 15.
Range.
So it's within the range.
And so I'm saying they should drop the density and not ask for a variance.
So which variance, yeah,
Can I just clarify really quick? So yeah, the density range would be between 8 and 15 units per acre. And the one standard that I think you're potentially considering with the flexibility is for the multifamily dwelling. That lot area is required to be 1,800 square feet per unit, and as currently proposed, it's at 1,600 square feet per unit, so.
Yeah, I mean, for the impervious cover as well, the setbacks, I just don't think we should be giving variances if the density could be decreased to potentially, and maybe it can't, but I don't think that's been shown to us, that these have to be implemented to make it work for the design of the layout of the land. My thought is, okay, well, you could increase the square foot per unit by having less units and just make them bigger.
Right?
So do that before you ask for a variance.
What do you think about the impervious cover being 84% per lot, but meeting the requirement overall?
I would go back to, I mean, it's in our code, this is the,
So
What
would
we
you,
have
you
said,
go
so I'd
per
say market
lot,
it.
or would you say the whole development's 60%, which is,
well, if it's in our code that has to be 75% per lot, then it should be 75% per lot.
per lot?
And I'm assuming that's why it's highlighted in blue is,
Yeah, these are challenging variances or flexibilities to discuss because the flexibilities, the need for those arises from the shape of the lot that surrounds each individual unit. And so when the applicant is requesting a setback variance, for example, or flexibility, it's from the side of the building, front, side, or rear, to the immediately adjacent property boundary. So in other words, if this were platted in a different manner, the applicant could increase the size of the lots surrounding the units with not a huge functional change to the rest of the development and still meet some of those standards, but they're proposing to plat it in this way because they want each individual unit to be owner occupied, but the common areas to be owned and maintained by an HOA. So there's some logic in, at least my mind as staff, to the setback variances for the attached townhome units, where I, think the discussion is definitely fair for the council is potentially to the impervious, although the overall development meets that, but then I think the discussion about density may land on that multifamily standard that you see.
I'm so sorry, so the thought that you were saying there is if you increase the footprint of the building, there's gonna be less shared green space.
Well, so if the the boundaries of the lots or they're owner occupied, so when I buy a townhome, I get just the small area perimeter around the unit, but then the rest of the area is open space. That's pretty common for townhome plats. And if the developer wanted to meet the strict letter of the law for setbacks, for example, a front yard setback is 20 feet, they would just push the lot boundary out. Now, that would create some issues for how this development is platted, and they may have to go back to the drawing board if they were gonna try and do it that way, because we've got concerns with, dry utility corridors and other utilities and things of that nature. So you couldn't just do that everywhere, but that's why staff have been comfortable, at least to this point, in recommending those flexibilities.
So in that hypothetical, because one of the requirements is 300 square feet of green space per unit.
Correct.
Does that when does that start to become an issue if you, again, because it's, 150, 200 square foot less for those units than the standard? I mean, where are they at right now for the amount of green space per unit?
So the PUD or minimum standards require at least 20% open space for the entire project. And that more than meets the 300 square feet for a townhome unit and a 200 square feet for a apartment unit. So in other words, they're way over what they would have to do as a minimum.
I suppose on the flip side, if you start reducing the green space, you have less of an opportunity for a couple of outdoor activity spaces. I mean, was there ever any discussion, because to your point, there are a couple of variances, and on my end for consistency, so we've approved multiple ones on the impervious surface where it met it overall, but not per unit. Legacy and North Star are examples. But were there ever discussions of it might actually be 2 apartment buildings and then fewer owner-occupied townhomes?
In all of the kind of concept plans and sort of more informal, I'll call it informal review that happened preceding this project, it's primarily just been the 1 apartment building and the townhomes. And just going back to how Inwood was initially envisioned, of course, nothing was ever approved or set in stone.
Correct,
when
they didn't get
Inwood was
preliminary
approved,
plat.
but, you know, at every point along the way, that seems to have been kind of the thinking and how this would develop.
Because in that hypothetical, again, it's not that it's right or wrong. If you did that and you had more density in your apartments, then your owner-occupied ones could be larger footprint for the building, and it might be potentially a larger parcel as well, because you're shifting more of that population for your up to 15 units per acre, more of it in those.
Applicant can just talk to your question if you wish to hear.
Your discretion.
If you'd like to comment on that, Emily, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't have the slide up, but with the preliminary plat that was approved with the master plan for Inwood, there were certain impervious surfaces that were allotted throughout the entire development, and unfortunately, I don't have the slide. This was presented at the April 14th Planning Commission meeting, but it did show that we're well within the allowed impervious surface that was granted with the master plan of Inwood. So I think it's just an interpretation thing. If you're looking at an individual townhome lot, that's gonna be a lot different than if you're looking at a single family lot.
Right,
Yep.
okay.
And just, more, you know, I guess I didn't bring this up, I was more focused on the variances, but I guess the other big concern of mine is obviously the no stormwater reuse for irrigation. I know, you know, previously we had kind of used the premature development is kind of a concern of why we can't move forward with development because of the water quantity, and as a result of that, I'd say the water quality issues, especially with irrigation during the summer, you know, causing us to have to mix wells. You know, I guess I see this again as that this would be, if there's not, especially if there's not gonna be stormwater ponding used for irrigation, as premature development. I mean, that is, we know that is the biggest use of our water during the summer. That's a big reason that we have to mix wells during the summer. And again, obviously, it's, you know, still within the MPCA's limit where it's safe to drink. But it raises concern with the residents. And so I think, you know, I know we've kind of moved past that premature development, but I feel like this is the first development that's been brought to us where the openness to use stormwater reuse for irrigation has not even been considered. So I just think that's another, you know, I guess another reason for me, I think that changes need to be made to this plan.
So when we talk about per capita use, right, and we're striving to go 75 gallons per day per capita, I think that on average, when we look at townhome units, when we get a per capita because of the decreased irrigation needs, because of the density and the less pervious surface, I think we're talking, and somebody can call me on, but I thought we were talking in the order of 35 to 40 gallons per capita in a townhome unit versus what it can reach in a single-family home. So to that extent, on the water use, when you regard that, I believe that, in my opinion, the townhome model helps out the city on an overall basis with the usage of water per capita, right? So that I guess that's the way, the lens that I look at when I see these different medium density, high density coming in versus large family lot and water reuse being used in those locations. That's just
No,
my.
and I think
my
that's,
view
I
on
think
it.
that's fair, I think it's a good point. Again, I just go back to, right, there is room for them to decrease their density. You know,
Okay.
that could be a stormwater pond, could be put in place of one of the units. And I feel like, I think there could be some compromise there, where we're taking away a little bit of the density, for some of these features, you know, it still is like a PUD, you know, we're looking for things that are going to, go above and beyond, you know, provide increased value, And again, I think that's been a big one for us with the water situation that we're in.
So if they put in a stormwater pond, by taking one unit out, it wouldn't have capacity to be used for, reuse for irrigation, would probably very
Well, and
little.
this- Yeah, and like, this is my, like, again, I'm not trying to plan it tonight, I just think, I think something else needs to be presented. If variances are being requested, if we're not gonna have stormwater reuse, and there is density that can decrease and still meet the limit, I'd like to
Just
see
commenting on
changes
the
being made
stormwater
there.
reuse, if taking out one unit wouldn't provide a big enough pond for much reuse, I mean.
Correct,
you'd get
you'd
very
have to be
little.
more than that, yeah.
And in my experience, yeah, this type of development uses less water. Absent the irrigation requirement, generally these units use about 20% less water than a single-family residential, because they don't have car washes and gardens and things like that. But I don't know about on the irrigation side, don't recall what that decrease would be, since the lots are smaller, but.
Yeah,
Sure.
okay. Any other discussion?
Clarifying question then for Nathan, what's being irrigated at the site? Besides the common spaces, I mean, are the yards between the street and the homes being irrigated, or is it really the common spaces?
So I think I'd have to have ask the developer to speak to that, but you see, a fair amount of open areas in the attached townhome part of the development. I would assume that, some of those green spaces get irrigated by a irrigation system.
I mean, I hate talking about how we can save water for an absolutely flawed lawsuit that was beyond terribly decided, but is a good conversation to have because we're required to. You both are correct. Look, these units use less per capita even without stormwater reuse. They do. So technically, it brings down our per capita usage as a city, which in her flawed decision is what she's basing upon, is per capita. She's not basing upon total usage. If she was smart, she would have done
Okay.
that. But, so it does help. On the flip side, have we approved one in the last couple of years without stormwater reuse? I feel like there was one that we did because it wasn't possible.
At-home apartments didn't have your.
At-home apartments, that's what I was trying to think of. We did approve one because it was not possible on site.
Correct.
So I guess for me, that is the difference. If it was possible on this, if the site has already been designed and platted to shed its stormwater to a different pond that already exists, I feel like from an engineering standpoint, you don't want to change that. That you don't want to suddenly redesign the entire site, especially when the EAW
Yeah.
was already done, taking this site into account for how it's going to function. I don't know if it'd be wise to suddenly change that entire design.
So does the stormwater go to an existing pond that has stormwater reuse?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a far enough zoomed out image in this slide deck, but my understanding, based on the comments from the developer just a little bit ago, is the stormwater in this whole development is regional in nature. It goes to different ponds. Apparently, this site drains to the pond that's adjacent to the single-family part of the
This
On
one,
the northwest.
this one.
Yeah.
Okay, if that pond's used for reuse, then they have
For all them.
stormwater reuse. It might not be for this site, but it's
They're using it on that
They're
single
using it-
family.
in the overall development.
Yes.
So we have stormwater reuse.
And on the impervious, I guess it is asking for consideration, but again, for me to be consistent, we have in the past looked at the total percentage throughout the site. And honestly, maybe this is something that we need to look at from our policy standpoint and how we set this up. Because we have multiple times said it's not based upon per lot, it's based upon the entire area. So unless there's another reason why we have to, that's outside of our, yes, sir.
Yeah, well, just one thought for you with impervious surface. So often you'll have an impervious surface limit for single-family lots because people will have driveways and pools and decks and things tend to grow over time. And so with this development, I would have significantly less concern that you're gonna have those impervious surfaces grow. So from that perspective, I wouldn't be as concerned, because if we have like a 40% maximum for a single-family lot, you know, we're able to review that as a planning department over time against everything they request in the future.
Somebody's not gonna build another shed.
Well, and they're not gonna be putting an 800 square foot patio in their backyard. They can't because of setbacks. They couldn't do it to begin with.
And the city will be obviously ensuring that the stormwater for this site, you know, is planned for. So.
Right. Yeah, I guess I remain concerned, and I would want it in the DA that there is, the crosswalk is looked into, and that there is a, study is not the right word, but analysis for where one shall be installed. It's not where one could, where one shall be. And I do want there to be some type of recreational activities for kids to do, to at least try to offset and try to keep kids on the site. But in terms of, I appreciate that the requirements do have the reinforcement that vinyl is not a part of this. To me, I don't care what the style is. Everyone has their different style, right? We've gone through this before.
Yep.
But there needs to be a style, and the initial images that we were shown, there wasn't anything. It was a building. So whatever is going to be the characteristic, the story for this neighborhood, there needs to be one. This is going to be a very specific place. Their own HOA. It sounds like its own miniature village, if you will. But yeah, I mean, it is within the 15 units. They are asking for limited exceptions, but I don't think they are outside the norm of what we've done in the past. And honestly, to me, some of them are the nature of what's being proposed to begin with. In order for these things to happen, some of these are going to be natural outcroppings of, if you do these townhomes that are permitted, you do this density, it's going to cause a little bit of a bumping up against this rule. And I plan on voting for it, but those specific changes and requirements are going to be in there.
All right. I'm gonna call the question. And again, my computer, give me a second, please. All those in favor of resolution 2025-049, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1. All right. The next one is,
Move to adopt ordinance 2025-12 establishing PUD standards for the Inwood Townhome Development requested by M&I Homes.
Support.
we have a motion and a second for ordinance 2025-12. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor to adopt ordinance 2025-12, establishing PUD standards for the Inwood Townhome Development request by M&I Homes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Move to adopt resolution 2025-050 approving summary publication for ordinance 2025-12.
Support.
We have a motion and a second for resolution 2025-050. Basically, getting this published for the record. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a clarifying question then for staff while we're still on this? Regarding that impervious, moving forward in the standards, because what you said makes sense, right? You don't want to go at 90% on an individual parcel. If you insert the word "or" to say like, it's this percent at a parcel, or this percent throughout the, and then it could be that discussion, right? This is that type of neighborhood where this one fits better. No, this one is the one that fits better. So at least then we're having like, that'd be my thought, but
We're not comparing oranges and apples?
yeah, because
Okay. Can we
Appreciate the
take that
feedback.
into
Thank you.
consideration and make a recommendation to council, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. We added the item for performance review summary for our city administrator, Nicole Miller. I had asked Councilmember Holtz to, upon our closed session meeting, come up with a summary of that discussion. And he's very kindly done so. Would you like to read it, or do you want me to?
I'll use the radio voice.
Okay.
The Lake Elmo City Council had a performance review for City Administrator Nicole Miller. The council found Administrator Miller's performance in the last year to excel in areas of communication, leadership, professionalism, accountability, and community engagement. The council looks forward to continuing to work with Administrator Miller on carrying out the city's long and short-term goals, continuing progress on employee retention and development, and developing a culture of excellence through public service throughout the city.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that does summarize our discussion fairly well. Next, we have council reports. Councilmember Dragisich, anything to report?
No report.
Councilmember Holtz?
The Lake Elmo Airport Advisory Commission had a meeting last Monday, and I am one of the co-chairs. Councilmember Craigness is a member as well and joined the team. And we had a thorough discussion about noise complaints from a very specific neighborhood. There's several thousand complaints from 17 households. And we also then had pretty good discussion about what are ways that the airport community, which is pilots, it's the MAC, it's the neighborhood, it's the neighboring cities, can try to increase engagement, education, activities. And so there's gonna be many conversations moving forward. It might mean a council member asks staff if we can insert a airport event in some of our outgoing communication. Like there's a barbecue coming up. It might be that there are additional education opportunities where the airport or maybe some of the members reach out to school districts to see if there are ways to have more field trips there. They are finishing up a place kind of right in the middle with a, it's not a pergola, but something similar, a viewing place where you literally will be able to go there, have a place to sit, and you watch airplanes go and take off. So again, if you have a 10-year-old child who loves seeing airplanes take off, that's gonna be the place to be. Currently, you shouldn't do it because it's under construction. But it's those types of opportunities. I reached, one of the airport members who's a pilot reached out to Chief Kalis. Long story short, they're gonna reach out to Bayport first to see if fire trucks and fire crews can come out for an event they have coming up. And Chief Kalis was fully on board with it if a different process happens. So it's those types of things of trying to make sure that we have a better engagement with the airport. So we're focusing on the positives that it brings and not focusing on other aspects. I am assuming you might talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just want to address it. Obviously, this last weekend was a horrific instance for politics in Minnesota especially. And we just want to, give our condolences to the Hortman family. And I'm drawing a blank on the Hoffman family, and hope that they get a good recovery. Thankfully, law enforcement captured the individual, and he'll have his day in court. There's really no sense in, no making sense of the actions that took place, and it certainly is unconscionable to think that somebody thinks that that's the answer. So, the couple other things that are less traumatic was I was able to go to the Lake Elmo Farmers Market. It's in full swing on Saturdays from I think 8 to 1 o'clock in the morning, or 9 to 1 o'clock in the morning.
9
in the afternoon, 9 to 1. Great vendors there. That group always does a good job. So if the weather's decent, go out there and get some fresh vegetables and bread and some meat and all that stuff. So the other thing is that as we like to have the community get together, the 4th of July, Kitty Parade is, as we saw, we had a consent agenda item for that. I know that the Connect Lake Elmo group is looking for volunteers to help out the Public Works Department and the law enforcement with some of the, just standing at different stations for traffic control and things of those nature. So if you are so inclined to be a volunteer for maybe a couple hours on on the 4th of July, I think that would, or the day before, that would be greatly appreciated. Councilmember Hearn.
No comment.
No report?
Okay. Staff reports.
Sure. Last night I had the opportunity to attend the fire department badge pinning ceremony and their recognition of their current membership with their families. It was really, really touching to see everyone there. They had over 100 attendees. And so one group I forgot to thank was the fire department leadership. So I want to say thank you. They did a great job organizing it, and it seemed to be a very good event.
Great. Julie?
No report.
No report.
No report.
No report.
All right.
Nothing for me.
No report?
No report.
Nathan, for the public, can you let them know the timeline for well number 2?
We're talking about the.
To be online?
You have to get online. I wish I could. I don't have that off the top of my
All
head
good.
right now.
All good. Sorry for randomly throwing that.
No, it's all good.
Here, let me
Just
throw you
to
under
say
the bus
something
real
that's
quick.
gonna not be true.
All right. Appreciate it. Gonna adjourn the meeting here at 9:06. Thank you, everybody. I just can't even think what goes through somebody's mind.